Today, we blast off to the music universe with singer, songwriter, and just absolute legend of music, Mr. Kent Blazy. Today on the Music Universe podcast.
We blasting off from Liverpool to
Nashville.
the Bluebird.
Yes, I have to tell you,
Kent.
the most stressful thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, I made a friend that you ended up going to high school with, but the most stressful thing, I want to tell this, I'm going to tell this story in a second. The most stressful thing I've ever done was stand in the standby line at the Bluebird when I couldn't get tickets. I had a free night. I had insisted on going to the Bluebird, and I went, and I stood in line, and the group of friends that I had made with his name is Walter, and his father. We were the last group let in, and we were sat in an old Ryman pew in the very back of the Bluebird.
Yeah.
And I sent you a picture we took later because then they were kind enough, and I grew to trust them enough that they actually took me back to my hotel. And I sent you the picture. He says, he's from a suburb of St. Louis, just like you. And I sent you a picture, and I'm on the phone with you, and I'm in the hotel, and I hear, "Holy shit, that's Walter Godet!" And you said it just like that.
I did not.
Yes, you did. And by the way, Mr. Missouri isn't the South. If you've ever watched Mama's Family with Vicki Lawrence, I know you're a Reba person, so you know who that is.
I've got the full series on DVD.
Raytown, and they consider themselves a Southern family. In fact, when Carol Burnett said we're going to do the family, and told the writers, Vicky's playing Mama, and we're doing it Southern. So yeah, your little twang came in there.
The boot heel of Missouri is considered the South. The rest of it, as the federal government declares, is Midwest. Point proven. Let's move on to our topic at hand.
Okay, yes, Kent Blazy, which is we talk about the Bluebird here. He talks about he was there when Garth was seen for his record deal, and we talk about this record from the Beatles to the Bluebird. I forgot to ask you because you look over all the talking points. Is there a Beatles song on there, or is it all originals? Just sort of inspired by that sound.
It's all originals inspired by that song. Kent had a hand in writing all of them. As he'll tell us in the interview, he did have a co-writer on 2 of the songs, but everything is just his original material, and really, really cool. I don't always get a chance to preview the albums and stuff that were handed ahead of time just because of time. And when I'm writing up news, a lot of times I have to focus on what I'm doing, so I don't get to listen. Otherwise, you start to see misprints and stuff like that. So I try to just keep it quiet and focus. So I don't always get to listen to it. But from what I've heard of this, it's really rocking. I mean, and his material, Kent's material, is pretty rocking. The albums he puts out. Plus, I mean, I think everybody knows "Ain't Going Down to the Sun" comes up. That's a Kent Blazy co-write with Garth, and that's a pretty hard rocking song for mid-90s there in the country music realm. So, this was the first time we've had Kent on video, but we have had him on 2 other times prior to this. Always a pleasure to chat with him. His deep, Southern accent is great. And speaking of Southern, and love it. Love what he puts out. And we get into pretty deep conversations about just Nashville in general and
the state of songwriting, and this was fun. This was a really, really fun one. Here's Kent Blazy. Welcome back to the Music Universe podcast. Singer, songwriter, musician. First time having him on video. Just an absolute legend in music, Mr. Kent Blazy. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I get to talk to you, and you get to talk me up. Hey.
You have new music again. I mean, it seems like you're cranking these albums out quite often, and I guess that's what singer-songwriters do. But tell us about From the Beatles to the Bluebird Cafe.
Well, that's an interesting story. I got to go to Liverpool last year, and, I'm a huge Beatle fan. And when you are at the dock, they have life-size statues of the Beatles, and it's pretty cool because all of them are carrying something that means something to them. So if you go Google that, it's an interesting story how they did that. But it was cold that day, and I was wearing a Bluebird sweatshirt that I had gotten when I was doing a benefit at the Bluebird a couple weeks before that. And somebody took a picture, and when I saw the picture, I thought, God, that's a great album title, From the Beatles to the Bluebird, because part of my career started due to Garth playing If Tomorrow Never Comes at the Bluebird Cafe after he'd been turned down by every record label, and somebody was in the audience to hear somebody else and told Garth, maybe we missed something, why don't you come back in? And thanks to the Bluebird, he got a record deal, and If Tomorrow Never Comes ended up being his first single that went #1. So pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. With that song specifically, because you mentioned If Tomorrow Never Comes, we'll get back to the album in a second. I know Buddy is looking at the press release and all the notes and stuff. You know, he talks all the time in his shows about the music sort of going further than the singer. But I'm wondering, as the songwriter, the person that song, that beautiful, emotional song that I've cried to more times than I care to admit, um, uh, comes out of, what does it mean to you when somebody says that song holds a very personal meaning to them, that it's more than just a song to them? What does it mean to you when somebody gets to talk to you about this song that, even though you're not the singer on the #1 record, it's still your baby, it's still your creation?
Well, from the time I started out wanting to write songs, my target was to write songs that could touch people, make them laugh, make them cry. And If Tomorrow Never Comes is definitely at the top of the list of people coming up and talking to me. It's been played at funerals, it's been played at weddings. It's just something a songwriter always dreams about. And just to hear these stories from people that come up after shows and talk to me about what it meant to them and what it still means to them, it's pretty amazing after 30 years.
Obviously, the Bluebird has a special place in your heart. The Beatles do. Going to digress here a second. Matt and I were in Europe last year to see the one of the Ireland shows that Garth did, and we actually went over to London. We made a European vacation out of it, and we went to Abbey Road. We didn't get to go inside of it, but we went to the gift shop. We walked the famous crosswalk. Did any of that inspire you as well? Like, did you get to visit that as well besides Liverpool?
No, we were supposed to get to London, and we had some difficulty, and so we ended up not getting to be there. But Liverpool, we did the whole bus tour where you go to John Lennon's house and George Harrison's and Ringo's and all that, and see Penny Lane and things like that, Strawberry Fields. So that was really cool. And went to the Cavern, and some people, of course, were playing music there, and it was just pretty amazing to see where they came from, because, at the time, Liverpool was just basically a dock where people would come in from all over the world, and they've really cleaned it up a lot. And I think part of it is because McCartney and Ringo go back every year and do a big benefit for them. And it just, it's the kind of thing where records back then were very hard to get. And so being it was a place where sailors came in, they would bring American music over. And that's where the Beatles started to hear people like Buddy Holly and Little Richard. And we take music for granted these days, where we go to Apple or wherever and get instantly what we want. But they would get on a bus and ride 3 hours to hear Tutti Frutti by Little Richard or the Everly Brothers or something, because that's the only way they could hear it. And that's what music meant to them. And I think that's really cool that that's how they became the group that changed the world, thanks to American music coming into England from America.
That had to be a cool sight to see, to get to go and do all of that, knowing what an impact they've had on music in general.
Well, and that was what I was kind of aiming at on this thing was, some of us were around when it started and got to see him on the Ed Sullivan Show. And Other people really don't know that much about them, or they know their later stuff. But basically, to me, when they did that first show, they changed the whole world. And that was
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason I started this record. And, I love that McCartney's still out there in his 80s playing. That's such an inspiration to me. And just the repercussions of what they started on that day are still echoing around the world. And I just wonder where we would have been without them.
Oh yeah, yeah, and to go even more old school with this record, you did kind of what a lot of people I think wish they could do, and you went into Sound Emporium, one of Nashville's oldest studios, but you recorded like the basic tracks in one day and then did overdubs the next day. So was this a 2-day tracking session?
It basically was almost like I would say a day and a half when the first day we cut 10 songs and I sang the vocals and played guitars at the same time. And so the next day I went in and overdubbed guitar fills and added some harmonies and stuff like that. But the musicians that I use are so incredible that, they can go in and cut 10 songs in one day and just get the magic that I'm looking for. And we were kind of looking for that two guitars, bass, and drums Beatle thing. And I think we nailed it pretty good because they knew where I was aiming for. And boy, they hit the mark.
Yeah, it's pretty rocking. These songs are
Yeah.
pretty rocking.
Well, I grew up pretty rocking, playing electric guitar is still my favorite thing. And I get to go out and do some showcases with this record with the band and get to play electric guitar. And I love it.
Love that you said that because we have made friends now. We have upcoming soon, or maybe by the time we air this, it'll be out. We have a Musicians Hall of Fame special, and our new friend Chris Lusinger was
Ooh.
our tour guide, and so now I'm picturing just you and him on stage at a Garth show because you were telling us earlier that that you have been maybe wanting to do a show. I can picture the two of you swapping off on some of those leads. That's
Well,
funny.
that would be fun. He's a hero to me. He's such a great guy, such a down to earth guy, but such a phenomenal guitar player. And we were just together the other day. Garth's cutting a new record, and he wanted all of us to come down and sing on a song. So Chris and I kind of stood next to each other and sang what he wanted us to sing. And that was kind of fun. And he had just bought a Bassman head of mine, an old white one from probably 1961 that I don't use. And he said he used that on the new record and just loved the sound he was getting out of it. So I thought that's pretty cool. I'm on the record one way or the other.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
Do you
awesome.
have any co-writes on this upcoming record that you could talk about?
The guy that I wrote a lot of the stuff on the last album with for the Byrds, Steve Allen, he's a great guitar player. He was in a pop band in the 80s called 2020 that you can go video YouTube him and see him on American Bandstand a couple times playing, but just an amazing guitar player. I call him my brother from another mother because we're so in tune with what we like. And so he wrote the first song with me, basically kind of wrote the music and I wrote the lyrics. And then he came up with that great 12-string part. And then the last song that's on the album is another thing that we recorded. And we actually had gone out and done a show at Leon Russell's studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is fantastic. And we did a show out there and they let us record in his studio. And so the last song that's on there is another thing I wrote with Steve. So he had the bookends of co-writing. And then the rest of them I just did by myself because I really didn't feel like a lot of people would want to write what I wanted to write. And so I just do it by myself. And COVID kind of got me into that more than I had in a long time. But, it's just personal stuff that I wanted to say. And Nashville songwriters don't really want to write that kind of stuff, I don't think, right now.
Yeah,
Well, I
and
think.
I
Go
don't
ahead, buddy.
think they want to write via Zoom anymore either. That was kind of forced upon
Right.
people, and now they just want to get together. I know Tracy Lawrence had said, during the pandemic, he would still get together with people. I think that's how you really get the good stuff too. But did
Yeah.
you find that Zoom was kind of difficult?
Yeah, I didn't really do much Zoom because it seemed kind of heartless. And So I was lucky at the time that Steve Allen lived like about 5 minutes away from me, and I already had some songs for the album before this last one he helped me with called Authentic. And so I called him up during COVID and I said, would you come over here and write with me? And like, you can sit outside and I can sit inside. And so we did that for a couple months. And then it was like, well, why don't we come in and be 6 feet apart? And so we did that for a while wearing masks. And then we just kind of said, okay, let's just be 6 feet apart. So we wrote this whole record for the Byrds basically during COVID being 6 feet apart. And it just, having the people in the room changes the chemistry compared to doing it on a machine or whatever. And you're really feeling what people are feeling. You're watching them better than you can do it on a Zoom. And I just that's why I started writing by myself during that period of time. I really didn't care about doing too many Zooms. And I did some Zoom concerts too, which were, I don't know, I'd have to say kind of like masturbating or something, you're, you're playing, but there's nobody there, but somebody's watching you. And it was just, I don't know, I found it pretty strange. So, and then the other thing, I don't know, it's probably better now, but when you were playing, your camera thing like we have right now was good, but on the side, there was another thing that was showing you what you were doing, and it was off by a millisecond.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a kind of interesting thing too, to deal with that. So I thought, I think I'll just pass on that stuff for now.
Yeah, it was tough. It's tough to do anything over Zoom because, like you said, there is a lag, and so I totally get it. It's funny, this record from the Beatles to the Bluebird. It's funny that you're doing it now. The timing. It seems like Nashville, to borrow from Taylor Swift for a second, it seems like Nashville kind of goes through eras. And I think right now Nashville is in an era where it's recognizing its ties to historical rock and roll. The Ryman has a partnership with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Country Music Hall of Fame. The new semi-permanent exhibit till 2025 is this Western Edge that kind of
Right.
gets to feature these people that, back in their day sounded rock, but now you're like, that sounds more Southern rock or country, like
Right.
your Bob Segers and your Eagles. What do you think of that about Nashville sort of acknowledging its ties to rock and roll now?
Well, it's an interesting thing because what's Nashville and what's Music Row is kind of two different things. And what Music Row is cutting and what Nashville's trying to do as far as bringing everybody together. I don't really feel that on Music Row. The only thing that I hear is we want to go back to 90s country, and you go, okay, and then you hear what they cut, and it's like, I don't think that's 90s country. So, but a lot of the kids that are writing now or that artists, they don't even have a clue what went on in the 60s or 70s or 80s or whatever. A friend of mine, Leslie Satcher, a great writer, was writing with this young girl who wanted to be a country artist. And she said, well, who do you listen to? And she said, well, I listen to what's on the radio. And Leslie said, well, have you ever heard like Merle Haggard? No. Have you ever heard of George Jones? No. Well, why don't you go back and listen to these people, and then we'll get together and write again. And the girl called her up about a month later and said, I've been going back and listening. I'm like to 1999 right now. Okay. But there's not a sense of history like there was when I came to town. And it's just like when I came to town, if somebody had introduced me to Bob McDill and asked me if I wanted to write with him, I'd say, well, yeah, I'd wash your car, I'll cut your grass, whatever. But these days, somebody introduces you to a young new artist or writer, and they go, you two ought to write together. And they go, why? And you just go, okay, that's fine. That's why I'll go write by myself.
Yeah. Well, and I think the history is also kind of being erased from Music Row by developers that are tearing it down. I mean, I'm just sad whenever I go to Nashville anymore. And I love Music Row. I've always loved it. I still love to drive up it just to see what's going on. But all the history there is like being erased.
Yeah, I did an album in probably 2018 or 19, and the song on there is "Where the Hell Did Music Row Go?" And I hadn't been down there in like 6 months or whatever, and I drove down, and I'm like, man, they tore it all down, and so many iconic places like where Christopherson wrote his songs and Dolly and Porter recorded. It's like it all got torn down, and it took a guy from out of town from the Black Keys to go, hey, we need to start saving some of this before it's all gone. And without him, I don't know what we would have done. You know, this is the same town that wanted to tear the Ryman down in the '80s. So it's weird here. History doesn't really mean that much sometimes to them.
Right, which is a shame. It is a shame because I think music is history. To your point about that writer telling the kid, go back and listen. You have to know what's come before in order to build upon it, or else it's going to be very thin at the very least.
Well,
You know,
you and I look at it that way, but I was with one young girl and we were talking about this, and she said, well, it doesn't matter what happened before. All that matters is what's happening now. And I said, well, you can leave now because this isn't going to work between us, But it was just a weird way to look at things. And, it's like Garth and I are still friends. We still write together. But you can write a number one song with one of these young people these days and you never hear from them again. And it's just weird to me that they're always on to what's the next new thing? Who's the next new writer? Who's the next new producer?
well,
And
not to be too critical, but off of that, what you're seeing, and I think you see this more in pop, but it's for better or worse, it's seeping into country too. A lot of these songs have five, six, seven, eight. Sometimes, in the case of Beyonce, I think her new album, when it was advertised, some of those songs had up to upwards of 24 or more writers on it. So
I
I
know.
think some of these people, you're not sitting down and focusing. You're contributing something, and then because of the union and the rules around crediting, you're getting that credit. So I think that's part of why you're never hearing from them again too. Is there's just they're on so much, but they're not. It's not focused. If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, it does. And, like the latest Dierks Bentley single, I think it had 8 writers on it. And I'm going, Dierks Bentley could write a whole album by himself. Why does he have 8 writers on here?
Mm-hmm.
But now they have these guys called track guys. I don't know if you've heard about them. They come in and build the track while you're writing the song. And then, somebody else has to get the in on the producer. And before you know it, there's 6 or 8 people on the song. And that's just kind of bizarre to me. But that's kind of where we've gone these days. So many of the songs that are on country radio have gone to that, where there's so many writers on it. I'm just amazed. And, to be snarky, it's like, couldn't you do better than that, with 8 people on a song? But that's the way it is
Too
in
many
music.
cooks. See, that's the law of adverse cause and effect. Too many cooks in the kitchen, a weaker product. Less cooks in the kitchen, a higher quality product. Absolutely.
Well, and I think you see that in the music that's being created in country music these days. The other thing that's kind of sad is because there's no money, and I know why they're doing it. After mechanicals disappeared thanks to CDs or whatever, all these little people started niches of songwriters that they keep it all in one place, so all the money goes to one place. But they're not looking for those outside songs like they used to. Garth, every one of his albums had half of the songs were outside songs. So he had Friends in Low Places, which took him to a whole nother level. He had The Dance, he had Shameless. All these things took him places that he could have written every song on the album by himself, but he went and found songs that were greater than him. And I don't really see that these days on Music Row. And there's so many great songs out there that never get cut that it's really interesting. And it's kind of going back. I just got a cut on Reba McEntire on a 15-year-old song. And, people are wanting to go back and hear what was back there because they can't find what they're looking for today. And
now we're going to quiz the Reba Master. Buddy, what song is it?
it's a song called Honky Tonk Song. And I
Ah,
wrote it with
cool.
Leslie Satcher, and it's a rockin' little thing. And I was pretty honored to get her to cut that thing.
Yeah, I know she's working on new music, and hopefully sooner than later. 2024 is what I'm hearing.
That's what I'm hearing too, which is always scary when you get a song cut in 2023 and they say, well, it's not coming out till 2024, and anything can happen in the meantime, you know.
Right.
Right. And I mean, you have this atmosphere too, where everything's streaming, and then one trend. There's a couple trends that I'm not really down with these days. Is releasing an EP, and then a couple months later a deluxe version, or the same thing with the album. I just think that, to me, sometimes is a waste of that material, because why not, if you've got 2 or 3 albums worth of music, space that out. Some of these artists are coming out with double or triple albums, and I don't know. I don't like that aspect of things. Usually double albums would be, a double vinyl, not a double CD or double digital, however you want to put that. But I just think some of these artists are cranking out so much that it's kind of taking
Piecemeal.
away
Yeah.
from it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Morgan Wallen put out what 30 something songs on his new
Yeah.
record.
Yeah.
And I don't keep up with how a lot of this stuff works, but I said, why would he put out that many songs? Because how many times do we buy like a anthology by somebody, say by I don't know, Pink Floyd or the Beatles or something, and there's so many songs on there, sometimes you don't even get through all of them. But somebody said, well, by putting out that many songs, every time he sells that group, he gets 3 album credits. So he's getting his numbers up really fast rather than putting out one every year. He just put out one and let the numbers start running up,
Right.
which I thought was interesting. I don't know if it's a great idea or not, but that's how they're doing it.
Yeah,
Right.
that's very true.
Before we let you go, we have to talk about. You might have told us this story, but we've been back to the Country Music Hall of Fame since then, and there's a guitar of yours in the Garth exhibit that Garth borrowed, but I don't know if he ever gave back. And it has something to do with the dance, I think,
Yeah.
or it's. Can you tell me that story? Because
Well, it's,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
it's an interesting story. When I met Garth, I had a recording studio, which is kind of how I met him. And so I always had guitars around. So when he would show up to write, he'd never bring a guitar. And he would always use one of mine. And so that guitar that's in the Hall of Fame is what we wrote If Tomorrow Never Comes On. But
Hmm.
one day we were writing and he looked at his watch and he said, oh my God, I'm supposed to be cutting a video today. And so he left real fast and he got to the studio to do the video. And he called me and said, I don't have a guitar. Will you bring me a guitar? So I grabbed that Martin and took it down there, and it ended up at the video was the dance, which ended up winning the video of the year. And so when they were putting his Garth paraphernalia together there, they asked if they could have that guitar, and it has been there a long time. Now we did a Bluebird hospice show to raise money for hospice. I think it actually fell on the day that we wrote If Tomorrow Never Comes. So I went down to the Country Music Hall of Fame and I snuck it out of there for a day and played it
Wow.
on that show. And then I took it back. And if he ever gets a museum together, I think that guitar will just go to that museum.
Really cool.
Oh yeah,
Well, you
yeah.
never know. Could go to the bar. Could go to the. I'm sure there'll be
Well,
some.
no, I'm not going to let that thing go to the bar.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm just saying he might do some museum stuff in the bar.
Oh, well, yeah, that's probably true. He probably will. So
Yeah.
I never know what he's going to do. He's usually about 10 steps ahead of everybody. So
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's probably
Well,
what he's working on.
yeah. And are you playing any of these songs on the road? Like, are you on tour?
Well, I took off. We were on the road so much earlier this year that I took off most of July, and I'm taking off a lot of August before I hit the road again. But I'm doing a lot of shows here in town, and I did a show at the Bluebird and a show at the Listening Room with my band, and we kind of previewed about 5 of the songs off the record. And I would love to get the guys in John Party's band who played on the record to do an album release party with me. And we were going to go out to Tulsa and do that, but Party all of a sudden has been booking them almost to the end of the year, where they were going to stop in September, and we had kind of something set up. But yeah, I'm out there and I'm playing them, introducing them to people, and telling the stories behind some of the songs, and just loving doing it.
It's awesome. That's awesome. Kent Blazy, from the Beatles to the Bluebird. Awesome. Thank you very much. This was a pleasure. We will be keeping up with you on the socials and on the website and with your releases, because you're one of the top songwriters in the world. And I think when I'm just going to say it, I'm not saying it to blow smoke. I think one of these days, when it cycles through, I don't know what category you would fall under. I think maybe one day Hall of Fame for you, Country Music Hall of Fame. Really, I can see that with the career that you've
Well,
had.
I was very honored to get inducted to the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame.
Yes,
So,
sir.
from your lips to God's ears, as they say.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, it'll be
Always
well
Thank you
deserved.
guys so much. Always a pleasure. And let's make more.
Yes, sir. Let's do
Absolutely.
it.
Anytime.
God, I could talk to him every day. He's just such a wealth of
And
knowledge.
for hours. I mean, we could have every conversation we have is something different. And, he brings up Garth a lot because I think he credits him to,
Right.
to the career he has. But there's always a new Garth story. I mean, when you have 30 years of history, I guess there would be, right? And really, really cool that he gets to continue doing this. And I love that he goes in and records an album within like a couple days. I did that once. I don't know if I ever told you this. I did that once. And it's quite stressful. But we had done all the recording and overdubs one day, and then the next day we went in to mix it. Now, it's not the greatest sounding record by any means, but it was in a Nashville area studio, Fry Pharmacy Studios to be exact, in a suburb there. And very cool. We still have the masters to that, and I think we might work on something with that called Leadwood Folk. And Leadwood is the town I'm from in Missouri, southeastern Missouri in the Midwest.
Awesome. No, yeah, it's a great album. Go and check it out, and more from Kent, I'm sure, very soon, because he just has one of those brains that doesn't stop.
Right.
So it's really, really fantastic. So for the Music Universe podcast, I'm Matt.
And I'm Buddy. Thanks for listening and watching. Be sure to hit like, subscribe, and share, and follow us on socials at The Music Uni, and check us out at themusicuniverse.com. Take care.